the first thing Sergeant Halloran ever taught me, and he taught it to me with his thumb pressed hard into my breastbone, hard enough to bruise, so the lesson would live in the bone and not just the ear was this. The weapon comes up for one reason and one reason only, and that reason is a threat to the one you guard. Not for anger, not for insult, not for fear, your own fear, which he said was the most common reason a green boy raises iron and the worst. You bring that bow up at the wrong moment, lad, he said, and you've not defended anyone, you've started something, and whatever you started, the princess is standing in the middle of it. Thumb in the breastbone, threat to the one you guard, nothing else. I said, yes, sergeant. I was 18, and I had been a guardsman of Ossian for 11 days. I should tell you about Halloran because he is half this story and he is dead, and a dead man can't tell his own half. He was not a large man. That surprised me. You hear sergeant of the Royal Guard and you picture a giant. And Halloran was wiry and gray and walked with a hitch in his left leg from a wound he never named. But there was a stillness to him that made the giant step around him in the yard. He had been a guardsman 40 years. He had stood through 2 wars and a poisoning and the bad winter when the old king died, and he had outlived everyone he trained with, and he carried that the way some men carry a limp, a thing that ached when the weather turned. The young guardsmen were afraid of him. I was afraid of him for about a month, and then I stopped being afraid of him and started something harder, which was loving him the awkward way a boy with no father left loves the first man who bothers to make him into something. Now, I am 20 years old and I have my crossbow half raised at a captain of my own army, and I am trying to remember how to breathe. Let me tell it from the start of the day, the now day, because the now day is the one with the child in it, and I cannot hold the 2 times in my head at once without setting one down. The gatehouse first. We brought the princess north because the south road was closed. The war with the marches had crept closer than the court liked to admit, and the king wanted his daughter moved to the old fortress at Kelder where the walls are thick and the politics thin. A small party. 6 guards, the princess, her woman, and me, the youngest of the 6, riding drag, which is where you put the green one at the back, where he can do the least harm. Princess Wynn is 11. I should tell you what 11 looks like after 4 days hard riding away from her mother in wartime, because the songs never do. It looks like a child holding herself very straight because someone told her a princess holds herself straight, and being tired under the straightness, and frightened under the tired, and covering all 3 with a stubborn little chin she keeps lifted. She did not complain once on that road. 11 years old, 4 days from her mother, riding toward a war, and she did not complain, and somewhere on the 2nd day I stopped thinking of her as the cargo and started thinking of her as the bravest small person I had ever been near. That was my first mistake, if it was a mistake. Halloran would say it was. You are not to think of them as people. You think of them as the post. I know, sergeant, I couldn't help it. There was a thing she did on the 3rd night that undid me. We'd made cold camp, no fires. We were too near the war for fires and she couldn't sleep. And her woman couldn't settle her, and I had the watch nearest her. And after a while she sat up in her blankets and looked across at me in the dark and asked, very quietly, not like a princess, just like a child, whether I thought her mother was awake too, right then, looking at the same stars. And I am not a clever man and I had no clever answer, and the truth was I didn't know. So I told her the only true thing I had, which was that her mother was certainly thinking of her whether she was awake or not, because that's what mothers do, they think of you in their sleep, my own had, and that the thinking crosses any distance there is. And she lay back down, and after a while her breathing went slow. And I sat there in the dark having said more words to a principal than Halloran would have approved of in a lifetime, and not sorry at all. And that was the night the post stopped being a post for me and became a child named Wynn who wondered if her mother could see the stars. The frontier gatehouse at Vel sits where the King's Road crosses into the war country, and in peacetime it's a sleepy toll post with 2 old men and a dog. In wartime it had become something else. They'd garrisoned it hard, fresh troops, a new captain, the whole apparatus of a border under threat, and they'd been given orders, the kind of orders that come down in wartime, that nothing and no one crosses without search and verification. No exceptions. Orders like that are written in warm rooms by men who will never have to look in the face of the exception they've forbidden. We came to the gate in the late afternoon, the light going long and amber the way it does, dust in it, the smell of horses and the cold iron smell that comes off a portcullis. And the captain there, a hard young man, not much older than me, new to his rank and wearing it too tight the way new captains do. The captain looked at our party, at our colors, at the princess, and he did the thing that started all of it. He did not bow, he demanded the search. Then, Halloran had a daughter. I didn't know it for weeks. He was not a man who spoke of himself. But there was a day he came to the watch quiet and wrong, and old Pell told me, that it was the anniversary of the girl's death, that she'd been 7, a fever, years gone now. And I understood something about Halloran that day that I have only fully understood since the gatehouse, that when he taught us to guard the princess, he was teaching us to guard a child he had failed to keep over and over every day, a second chance at a thing that cannot be done twice. Threat to the one you guard, he'd say, thumb in the breastbone, and I think now he was saying, don't be where I was, don't stand by, don't ever stand by while a child. I didn't understand it then. I thought it was just doctrine. The young think everything is just doctrine. Now, the captain demanded the search, and our sergeant, not Halloran. Halloran was not on this ride, and God, I wished he were. I have never wished for anything the way I wished for Halloran at that gate. Our sergeant, a decent enough man named Cobb, tried to do it right. Showed the seals. The king's own seal on the writ, the princess's person, the colors. Said plainly who this was. A bow, a wave-through, that's all it should have taken. That's all it has ever taken in the history of the King's Road, because a child with the royal seal does not get searched like a wool smuggler. The captain said his orders made no exception. He said it loud, for his own men to hear, the way a small man does when he's decided to be large in front of an audience. He said the seal could be forged. He said in wartime the enemy's favorite trick is a forged writ and a child actress, and he was not going to be the man who let the marches walk a poisoner through his gate dressed as a princess. And there's just enough sense in that. That's the sick thing. There's just enough sense in it that Cobb hesitated, and the hesitation was the door, and the captain walked his authority right through it. He ordered the princess down off her horse, for search. I watched Wynn's face when she understood what was being asked, the straight little back, the lifted chin. And under it, for just a moment, the child, the 11-year-old 4 days from her mother who had been brave for the whole long road, and was now being told by a shouting stranger in iron that she was a thing to be searched, suspected, handled, that her word and her seal and her own face counted for nothing. She looked back down the line. She looked for the familiar. And the familiar she found because I was drag, I was at the back, I was where you put the green one, the familiar she found was me. She looked at me, 11 years old, and she didn't say help me, she was too proud and too frightened to say it, but her eyes said it. Her eyes said the thing the mouth wouldn't, and I have not been free of those eyes since, and I do not expect to be. I'll tell you what I did. But I have to go back to Halloran first, one more time, because everything I did at that gate, I did with Halloran's thumb still pressed into my breastbone, and you can't understand the one without the other. There was a drill Halloran ran that I hated. He called it the wrong order drill, and he ran it on us until we wept, some of us, the younger ones. He would stand a man in front of us, usually old Pell, playing a part, and Pell would give us an order, a real-sounding order with rank behind it, and the order would be wrong. Search the ambassador, strike the petitioner, stand aside and let this man pass to the princess. And we were to refuse. That was the drill. To refuse a lawful-sounding order from a man with rank, because the order was wrong, and to hold the refusal while Pell shouted in our faces and threatened us with the lash and the noose and disgrace. All the things they can do to a guardsman who refuses an order, and we were to stand and take it and keep refusing. Most drills teach you to obey. This one taught us to disobey, and it was the hardest thing in the whole training, harder than the standing, harder than the blade work, because everything else in a guardsman's life is built to make obedience automatic, and here was Halloran trying to carve out one small chamber in us where obedience stopped and something older started. "There will come a day," he said, and he didn't press my breastbone for this one, he said it quiet, which was worse. "There will come a day when the wrong order comes from a real mouth with real rank, and there'll be no Pell playing a part and no drill bell to end it. And on that day you will be alone with it, and you will have one breath to decide whether you're my guardsman or theirs. I'm trying to make that breath survivable. That's all this is. I'm trying to make sure that, when you're alone with the worst breath of your life, your body already knows which way to turn." He ran it on me more than the others. I didn't understand why at the time, and it made me hate the drill, hate him a little, the way you hate the one who singles you out. He'd put Pell in front of me and have him give the wrong order, and then Halloran would stand at my shoulder and not help, just watch, while Pell screamed. And if I wavered, if my eyes dropped, if my chin came down, if I started to obey out of the sheer animal need to make the shouting stop, he'd end the drill and make me do it again. And again. Once he kept me at it past dark. The whole rest of the company dismissed to their supper, just me and Pell and the wrong orders and Halloran's silence, until I stopped wavering, until the refusal came up out of me without the wavering at all, clean, like a thing my body knew instead of a thing I was deciding. Then he let me go. He didn't praise me. He just said, "Now it's in the bone," and limped off to his own cold supper. I was furious. I ate alone, and I thought, the old man's cruel. The old man's lost something up here, and I went to my cot still hating him. I thought he was being grand. The young think the old are being grand when they're being most exactly truthful. Now, the captain's men moved to take the princess down off her horse. And here is where the 2 times I have been carrying finally came together in the amber dust, with the cold iron smell of the portcullis and the long light and a child's eyes on me. Here is where Halloran's drill stopped being a drill. Because everything Cobb could do, the right way, the lawful way, he had done. He'd shown the seal. He'd named the princess. He'd stood on protocol, and protocol had not been enough, because the captain had wrapped his cruelty in a wartime order, and there is no clean lawful answer to man who has done that. The lawful answers were all used up, and the thing coming next was a frightened captain's men putting their hands on an 11-year-old to search her like a criminal in front of a gate full of soldiers, and turning her, in that moment, in her own eyes and theirs, from a princess of Ossian into a suspect, a thing. A body to be patted down, and I knew the way Halloran built me to know that the search itself was the threat, not a blade, not a poisoner. The search was the harm. The harm was being done by my own side, in good order, with rank behind it, and that is the exact shape of the worst breath of your life, the one Halloran spent a year trying to make survivable. I came down off my horse. I don't fully remember deciding to. I came down and I walked up the line, past Cobb, past the older guards who were frozen the way good men freeze when the wrongness is wearing their own colors, and I put myself between the captain's men and the princess's horse, and I raised my crossbow. Half raised. I want to be honest about the half. I did not level it at the captain's heart. Some last grain of Halloran in me kept the point down, because a leveled bow is a started thing, and Halloran's voice was in my ear even then. Whatever you start, the princess is standing in the middle of it. So I held it half raised, across my body, the bolt seated, the message unmistakable and the killing not yet chosen. The most dangerous place a weapon can be, the in-between place. I had made myself a door that the captain's men could not walk through without it becoming blood, and I had done it to my own army. 11 days, no, 2 years now, 2 years a guardsman and still the green one. And I stood there with my heart going like a war drum, and waited to find out what kind of man I was. The gate went silent, that particular silence of many armed men all recalculating at once. I want to give you the gate as it was in that silence, because I lived a year inside those few breaths and they are scored into me. The light was the amber of late afternoon going to evening, thick with the dust our horses had raised, and it lay across everything like something poured. The portcullis above us breathed its cold iron smell down on the back of my neck. I could hear the ordinary things made terrible by the silence, a horse shifting its weight and blowing, a fly, the creak of someone's harness as they held too still, my own blood loud in my ears. The captain's men had their hands on their weapons but not drawn, that in-between place, the same place my bow was, the whole gate balanced on an edge where one twitch sent everyone over. I could feel my brothers behind me, Cobb and the others, frozen in the good men's freeze, and I knew none of them would back me, and I knew none of them would stop me, and I understood for the first time exactly what Halloran meant by alone. I had never been so alone. 20 years old, my arms beginning to burn, the whole weight of the king's law on the side of the man I was defying, and one small child behind me who was the only thing in the world that made the burning arms worth it. The captain turned his shouting on me, and it was the drill. It was Pell's part word for word, except it was real and there was no bell coming. He told me to lower the weapon. He told me I was raising iron against a king's officer in time of war, that the penalty was the rope, that I'd hang before nightfall and my family would hear I'd died a mutineer, that I was 18, 20, he didn't know my age, he just reached for young the way they do, that I was a green fool throwing my life away for a forged writ. And every word he said was true. That's the part the songs leave out. Every single thing he threatened me with was real and lawful, and I knew it, and I stood in it, the way Halloran made me stand in it 100 times with Pell screaming an inch from my face, and I kept the bow half raised, and I did not lower it. I found one sentence. My voice came out steadier than I was, which surprised me. It must have been the drill, the body doing what it was built to do while the man inside shook. I said, "She is the one I guard. You'll not put hands on her while I'm breathing." That's all, not clever, not grand. Halloran would have grunted at it, maybe, the plainness of it. She is the one I guard. The whole of my reason, the whole of the drill, the whole of the chamber he'd carved in me where obedience stopped. All of it came out as those 8 words. And then there was nothing more to say, and only the waiting, the bow half raised, the captain's face going from red to white, his hand drifting toward his own blade, his men frozen, my brothers behind me frozen, the child above and behind me very still. And then a thing happened that I did not cause and cannot take credit for, and I'll tell you what it was because it's the hinge, but I have to stop a moment first. My arms were beginning to shake from holding the bow, and I needed them not to shake for what came next, and I needed, just for a breath, to not be 20 years old and alone at a gate with the rope in my future. Let me breathe, the way I made myself breathe then. Then I'll tell you who spoke into that silence, and what it cost, and what it saved. The one who spoke into the silence was the child. I had braced for it to be Cobb, finding his spine at last, or the older guards, or the captain's own conscience. It was none of them. It was Princess Wynn, 11 years old, 4 days from her mother, who in the middle of all that iron and shouting did the bravest thing I have ever watched a person do. She did not cling to the protection I'd made of my body. She came down off her horse herself, unbidden, while I stood there having staked my life on keeping her up on it. She climbed down past me, put her small hand flat on the stock of my crossbow and pushed it gently down, toward the ground, disarming me. Disarming her own defender. And then she turned to the captain, and she lifted that stubborn little chin, and she said to him, to the man who'd called her a forgery, she said that she would submit to his search. That if his orders said the king's road must be safe even from a princess, then she would not be the one to make his soldiers break their orders. That he could search her, and she would stand still for it on one condition, that he look at her while he did it, that he not pretend she was a thing, that he search her the way you search a person, with his eyes on her face, and then live the rest of his life knowing he had done it. 11 years old. I have turned this over 1,000 times since, and I am still not to the bottom of it. She understood, without a year of Halloran's drills, without anything but her own frightened, clever heart, she understood what I in my crossbow and my 8 words had not, that the way to win was not to make it blood, that a half-raised bow only had 2 endings, and both of them ended with her in the middle of something terrible, a dead captain or a hanged guardsman or both, and either way a wargate full of soldiers who would remember that the crown answered a wrongful order with a killing. She saw a third way that I, trained to see threats, could not see. She gave the captain his search, and in the giving turned it into his shame instead of hers. She made herself small and still and looked him in the eye, and she made him be the man who searched a brave child who'd offered no resistance, in front of his own troops, with her looking at him the whole time. He couldn't do it. He got 3 steps into it, a pat at her travel cloak, his jaw working, his men silent, the child's eyes steady on his face the way she demanded, and he couldn't do it. Something in a man breaks when a child he's bullying refuses to be afraid of him in the way he needs her to be. He stepped back. He muttered something about the seal being in order after all, the light being better now, some lie to climb down by, and a man needs a lie to climb down by, and she'd been wise enough to leave him one. She hadn't humiliated him with words. She'd let him humiliate himself with his own hands and then left him a ladder. He waved us through. The portcullis came up with that iron shriek. We rode into the war country with the princess's seal verified, and not one drop of blood spilled, and behind us a young captain stood in the amber dust, having learned, I hope, the lesson it took Halloran a dead daughter to learn. Then, I never got to tell Halloran. That's the grief stitched through all of this, and I have to set it down or the telling's a lie. Halloran wasn't on the ride because Halloran was dead. He died that winter, quiet in his sleep, an old guardsman's good death that none of us could believe he'd been allowed, after the life he had. We buried him in the cold ground outside the barracks, and I stood at the grave thinking I had learned everything he had to teach, and would never again have a use for the wrong order drill, that it had been a strange, dark game an old man played, and that I'd carry it the way you carry a dead man's odd habits, fondly, uselessly. I was wrong. He wasn't teaching me a game. He was reaching forward through his own death to a gate at Vel he'd never see, to stand beside a green boy in the worst breath of his life and make it survivable. Threat to the one you guard, nothing else. He'd carved the chamber in me, and then he died. And at the gate the chamber held, and held a man's weight, and a child walked out of the war country alive, partly because a dead sergeant had pressed his thumb into my breastbone hard enough to bruise the bone. I think about the dead daughter now in a way I couldn't at the grave. 7 years old, a fever, years gone. He couldn't save her. No one can save a child from a fever by standing in front of it with a weapon. That's the cruelty of the thing that took her. There's no gate to hold, no order to refuse, nothing to put your body between. And I think he spent the rest of his life turning that helplessness into the one thing he could do, which was to make other men into the kind who would not be helpless when the threat was the kind you could stand in front of. Every drill was for her. Every thumb in every green breastbone was for her. He couldn't guard his own child, so he made 100 boys who would guard everyone else's, and he did it without once saying her name to us, carrying it alone the way the post teaches you to carry everything alone. I didn't earn that gift. He gave it to me before he knew I'd need it, before either of us did, and then he died without knowing it had worked. That's the part I can't get past. He never got to know it worked. Now, we reached Kelder. The princess is safe behind the thick walls and the thin politics, as safe as anyone is in a war. They've not hanged me, though there was a reckoning. The captain sent his report, and I sent mine, and Cobb sent his, and the court read all 3, and in the end the thing that saved me was the thing that had nearly damned me, that I'd kept the bow half raised, that I never leveled it, that I'd built a door and not fired through it. A leveled bow is mutiny. A half-raised one, held while a wrongful order was refused, with no blood drawn and the principal brought through safe. The court called that judgment in the end not mutiny, though it was a near thing, and I think it was the princess's own account that tipped it, because she wrote them. An 11-year-old wrote the court in her own hand, and I'm told the writ said that the guardsman at the gate had done exactly what a guardsman should, and that she would have no other at her back. She would have no other at her back. So I'm her guard now properly, not the green one riding drag, but a name on her detail, by her own asking. And I have learned the thing Halloran knew, and the thing the princess taught me both, and they are different things, and I need both, and I'll set them down here at the end so they're not lost. Halloran taught me when to raise the weapon, only for a threat to the one you guard, and that a wrongful order from your own side can be that threat, and that you must be willing to stand alone in the worst breath of your life and refuse it. But the princess taught me the other half, the half Halloran with all his grief never reached, the half maybe only a child 4 days from her mother could have reached. That raising the weapon is the smallest and crudest of the answers, and the truer courage is sometimes to find the third way, the way that costs the wrongdoer his certainty instead of his life, that turns the harm back into the shame of the one who meant it, and that to be brave is not always to make a thing into blood, but sometimes to make yourself very small and still and unafraid, and to look the bully in the eye, and to leave him a ladder to climb down by even as you take everything else away from him. I raised my crossbow for her. I'd do it again. But I pray I never have to, because the day I learned the most about courage was the day an 11-year-old reached past my weapon and pushed it gently toward the ground, and showed me there was a braver way than the one I'd been so sure of. I keep Halloran's lesson in my hands. I keep hers in my chest. A guardsman needs both. And the small grave child of Ossian, who held her chin up at a wargate and disarmed her own defender to win a fight without a death, she will never know, because I'll never find the words to tell her, that she finished the teaching a good dead man started, and that between the two of them, the serjeant and the princess, they made me into whatever it is I am now. Which is hers, simply that, hers at her back for as long as she'll have me. That's the whole of it, both times of it, set down at last in one place. Halloran's thumb and Wynn's hand, the raised bow and the lowered one. I think he'd have liked her. I think at the grave, if I'd known what was coming, I could have told him, "Rest easy, old man. The chamber you carved holds, and there's a child up ahead who's going to teach me the part you couldn't."